Welcome to the First Light Podcast with excerpts from our Friday, January 28th radio broadcast. I'm Clayton Neville. As we close out the month, a Supreme Court justice begins to wrap up a career and 3 decades on the nation's highest court. Now official, Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer stepping down, leaving President Biden to choose his replacement. The president now doubling down on a campaign promise to nominate a black woman to the high court. We'll have all the details you need on that. Tension still rising in Ukraine as many fear a Russian invasion is imminent. We'll have the latest there, and we'll spend time hearing about what Ukrainians are going through as they navigate potentially troubled waters. Some Americans waking up this morning concerned about their loved ones overseas. And Mark Cuban, yes, the NBA owner. Yes, the Shark Tank guy. Yes, the pharmacist. Well, kind of. The billionaire wants to save you money on prescription drugs. How much are we talking? We'll hear more on that. Plus, we'll tell you about Picasso going the way of the NFT. Kevin Carr tells us what to see this weekend. All that and more waiting for you this morning at First Light. But now Linda Kenyon has more on the retirement announcement from Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. Linda?
Clayton, the 83-year-old justice who has served 28 years on the Supreme Court bench, says he will step down after the Supreme Court's current term ends, and his successor has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Speaking at the White House, Justice Breyer said his job at the Supreme Court has been both rewarding and challenging.
This is a complicated country. There are more than 330 million people, and my mother used to say it's every race, it's every religion, and she would emphasize this, and it's every point of view possible.
President Biden praised Justice Breyer for his service on the nation's highest court.
It includes his stature as a beacon of wisdom on our Constitution and what it means. And through it all, Justice Breyer has worked tirelessly to give faith to the notion that the law exists to help the people.
When it comes to Breyer's replacement, the president reiterated a pledge he made during the presidential campaign.
And that person will be the first black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court. It's long overdue in my view.
Saying black women deserve representation on the court. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki sought to dispel criticism about the president's criteria.
The president's view is that anyone who's saying that that's not possible, or we can't find the most eminently qualified person, that's ludicrous. I mean, that's suggesting that black women should not be a part of the most important court in our nation, that there aren't black women who have distinguished themselves by rising to the top of the legal profession with the strongest credentials imaginable. There are.
And while the White House has not released the names of any possible nominees,
we have not mentioned a single name. We have not put out a list. The president made very clear he has not made a selection.
The president did give some indication about how the selection process will work.
I'll meet with the potential nominees, and it is my intention to announce my decision before the end of February.
After that, confirmation hearings will begin in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then a confirmation vote by the full Senate.
I'll ask the Senate to move promptly on my choice.
The president's choice will need only a simple majority vote to win confirmation. And since the Democrats hold the majority in the Senate, chances are quite good the nominee will be confirmed by at least a simple majority. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who as Majority Leader had refused to give then-President Obama's Supreme Court nominee a hearing or a vote, now says he will give President Biden's pick a fair look. At the same time, though, he said in his words, the president must not outsource this important decision to the radical left. And he added, the American people deserve a nominee with demonstrated reverence for the written text of our laws and our Constitution. Linda Kenyon, Washington.
Linda, thank you. It's been busy at the White House with a new Supreme Court justice to nominate and the distinct possibility that Russia could invade Ukraine. John Stolness has the latest on that from Washington.
The chances of a Russian invasion of Ukraine appear to be increasing by the day, with President Biden reportedly warning his Ukrainian counterpart Vladimir Zelensky yesterday that there was a high likelihood Russia could invade in late February. Meanwhile, Russia maintains they have no intention of invading the former Soviet republic, despite, as Pentagon spokesman John Kirby notes, increasing military exercises by the Russians in the region.
We continue to see, including in the last 24 hours, more accumulation of credible combat forces arrayed by the Russians in again, the western part of their country and in Belarus.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says she hopes Russia is true to their word.
We don't know if the Russians are playing games on diplomacy. We hope not.
One piece of leverage for the West is the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, built to send natural gas from Russia to Germany, a potential cash cow for the Russians. Victoria Nuland, Undersecretary for Political Affairs at the State Department, says
if Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
It's unclear how the U.S. would stop the pipeline from going into effect. Officials are looking to Germany to help with that. In a letter sent by the U.S. to the Kremlin earlier this week, the United States flatly refused Russia's demand that Ukraine be permanently banned from NATO and say the Allied deployment of troops and military equipment in Eastern Europe is non-negotiable. Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, says the ball is in Russia's court.
Although Russia created this crisis, we all hope that diplomacy will succeed.
All eyes are now on Vladimir Putin as he decides whether the Russians will challenge the West and risk crushing economic sanctions on his country, or go the diplomatic route and de-escalate the situation. John Stolness, Washington.
Time now to turn to the movies and to review a film with a symphony of emotions, according to its write-up. Kevin Carr, it's called Cyrano, Symphony of Emotions. Is that about right?
I think that's actually a relatively accurate way of describing it. And good morning, Clayton. This is a musical version of Cyrano de Bergerac, and it was done as a stage play written specifically for star Peter Dinklage and Haley Bennett, who plays Roxanne in it. And whereas, the original Cyrano deals with facial issues, his nose in particular. But of course, this version of Cyrano, Peter Dinklage is he's a dwarf. So of course they're dealing with the short diminutive structure. And that's how they sort of frame him as the sort of like the outcast, but he's a very witty person and very witty writer, and he's got a previous relationship of friendship with Roxanne, like I said, played by Haley Bennett, and they originated these in a stage performance of this with the music to it, so it's kind of tailor-made for them. Now it's getting a lot of award buzz. I think Peter Dinklage got nominated for some Best Actor in a Motion Picture. I think that's what he was nominated at for the Golden Globes, and he's great. I've always liked Peter Dinklage. I think he's a fantastic actor. The movie itself, it's directed by Joe Wright, and he's known for doing these sort of elaborate costume dramas like Pride and Prejudice and such, and he does lean into that a bit, and it does kind of give that almost smarmy feel of the French nation at the time, but it also has that lighthearted music. Some songs are better than others, but I will say this, of anything, it's a very unique take on the Cyrano story.
Yeah, you talk about the elaborate costumes. This is a period piece, but elaborate is certainly the right word, because you look at some of these and they've got the big dresses, they've got the time period down and everything like that. So as far as the direction and production and everything, this is a pretty high profile film.
Yeah, pretty high profile. They pushed it as an award film. It had a very limited run right around Christmas, right before the end of the year, to qualify for Oscars. But now it's opening nationwide in a wide release this week, so you can go check it out in theaters. So Cyrano it's a musical. So keep that in mind. It at times a little bit overwritten with the dialogue. I've never read the original book or seen the play. I've never seen the original play, so I can't tell you how close it is to that. But it's good enough. I mean, there's anything I think that I would have an issue with this movie are more about the story structure that are sort of baked into the original story. They can't exactly change that.
So a true love story. So Kevin Carr, how many hearts do you give Cyrano?
I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. Like I said, it's a good adaptation. Peter Dinklage really does shine in it, but there are some slow moments to me.
It's Cyrano. Kevin Carr, as always, we appreciate your review.
Thank you.
Pablo, meet crypto. Heirs of Pablo Picasso, the famed 20th century Spanish artist, are vaulting into 21st century commerce by selling over 1,000 digital art pieces, or NFTs, of one of his ceramic works that's never been seen publicly. Picasso's granddaughter Marina Picasso and his great-grandson Florian are heading up the sale. It gets underway today and also includes the actual ceramic. The family's not showing off the piece just yet, but they have shown a sliver of the underside of the work linked to the NFTs, a ceramic piece about the size of a salad bowl with a thick yellow line, a green splotch, and a brushed-on number 58 for the year it was made. This is Friday at First Light. It's a Friday morning on First Light, and we move to the situation in Ukraine, where Russian troops continue to build up on the border. Many believe an invasion is imminent. Some are more used to the tension than others. Christia Jeremez is the president of the Ukrainian American Society of Texas. She's closely watching the situation unfold and joins us now. Christia, the Ukrainian American perspective in all of this, watching from afar. What's that like?
Well, the Ukrainian Americans in the United States are extremely concerned, obviously, for the welfare of our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. But we are also concerned as Americans, as human beings who understand the difference between democracy and dictatorship. So, we come together to bring the attention to what is going on with Ukraine from a standpoint that it affects the world as a whole. It affects us globally. What's happening in Ukraine is potentially going to happen beyond its borders. So we are extremely concerned for that reason.
Well, with that in mind, the reason that what is happening now is happening is because Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed frustration and anger, really demands, is what it is, that Ukraine and other former Soviet countries should not and cannot join NATO. He's demanding that they cannot. But it goes deeper than that. Give us a little bit of the background between Russia, Ukraine, how the Soviet Union ties into all of this, just to give the background of this isn't something that Ukrainians are dealing with now for the first time.
It is not. And it is a historical problem because first of all, let's establish the fact that Ukraine is an ancient country. There has been documented archaeological finds on the territory of Ukraine, including Crimea, that Russia illegally annexed, going back 4,000 years ago before Christ. So that history, that foundation of existence is something that when Moscow started to grow as a group of people, tapped into and took as their own history. So that is extremely important to the Russian Federation today because they have established an identity based on Ukrainian history. And Ukraine has many times fought off the Russians and many times unsuccessfully became captives of and enslaved, basically, by the dictatorship that existed by the various rulers of the former Russian Federation. So we have lost millions of Ukrainians to the atrocities of the former Soviet Union. For example, one is the most important, I would think, to bring reference to is Stalin's Ukrainian genocide of 1931-33, where over 10 million Ukrainians died from a mass starvation. So this history is not a good history between Ukrainians and Russians. Russia wants to hold on to Ukraine because of its size. It is the largest country in Europe. Because of its location, being on a Mediterranean seaport where the temperatures are, constant for the most part year round. So strategically, it's a good place for Russia to have naval bases, and main reason why it came on and just took Crimea. But it's also what's at stake here is Russia's identity, Russia's political standing, Russia's ability to keep a stronghold on nations that were part of their original sphere under the former Soviet Union. That sphere is important to have a handle on and control over, because you can't have a dictatorship if you don't have control. The mindset of the Ukrainian people have always been to preserve their identity, to preserve their culture, their language, their history. So Ukrainians have been fighting off the Russians for a long, long time. And finally, we've had periods of independence in the past, but the most recent that is documented in today's history books are from 1991. So that has been a pain to Putin ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 91. And Putin has tried strategic ways to keep control over Ukraine, keeping corruption there, keeping puppet governments, keeping a handle. And recently in 2014, with the annexation and the creation of a hybrid war in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass area, that all keeps Ukraine destabilized. That is Putin's intent, is to keep Ukraine out of NATO, because if Ukraine has inner conflict on its soil, NATO won't allow it in. So that's all purposeful.
So, Christia, groups like yours, Ukrainian American societies, what are you guys doing? And what can you do right now? Because there hasn't been an invasion yet. It's not for certain that there will be, although a lot of people are saying that it's imminent. What can groups like yours do, and what are you doing?
So, prefacing what just recently happened with Putin, of course, we saw signs of him wanting to be a disruptive force before. And so we tried to keep a close connection with our senators and congressmen to be our voice on a local level in between, in different states. Now we're coming together more from the standpoint of, we're still wanting to make sure that we have a connection and a line to the president and through congressmen and senators. But we, with different organizations, are communicating to say, if there is a humanitarian crisis that occurs because Putin does come on to the territory of Ukraine and there's a mass, migration from east to west, we've got to be prepared for that. In the past, we've sent aid to Ukraine. We've helped work together with local churches and other humanitarian organizations and be whatever vehicle of support that we can possibly be.
Christia, we appreciate you taking time to join us.
Thank you very much, and pray for Ukraine.
Let's turn to a topic that we've all learned way more about than we probably would have preferred during this pandemic: pharmacies and medicine. The industry could be changing if billionaire Mark Cuban has anything to say about it. Paul Seegert, a consultant with PCS Advisors, joins us now to talk about the online pharmacy that the Shark Tank star and entrepreneur Paul is launching.
Yeah, he is launching a pharmacy that I think could be a real disruptor to our business. It's going direct to the manufacturers for drugs. You start with 100 generic drugs and then marking them up 15% and selling them to the consumer, cutting out all the traditional middle players that add most of the waste in our system.
You talk about the markup of 15%. Some may say, well, that's relatively high. Well, that's nothing compared to what some of these big pharmaceutical companies are doing. At times, they jack them up by 100 or 1,000 times? Yeah, very easily. If you use insulin as a quick example, most commonly prescribed insulin right now, Humalog by Eli Lilly, is about $550 a month. Monthly supply, 60% of the total is waste that's added by middle players. And I'm not even talking about people in the real supply chain. That doesn't go to the manufacturer of the drug, doesn't go to the wholesaler or the pharmacy. It's other middle players that are just, unfortunately adding a lot of cost for our consumers. So Mark Cuban's company is going straight to the manufacturers, buying it and then selling it for 15% markup, which is a lot cheaper. But now these are generic drugs, right? So what's the difference there? I know this is kind of starting slow for Cuban. Yeah, I think that's a really smart approach that he's taking. He's going after these generic drugs at first, which is not going to hit the big profits of big pharma. So I think that's smart because he'll probably face less opposition.
in getting it going. And then it wouldn't surprise me at all if he then expanded the model to go after some of the higher dollar brand and specialty drugs that can be $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, or even more.
There may not be a clear answer to this, but why is this resolution, and we'll see if it pans out to be a solution here in the long term, but why is it taking this long for this to happen? How have the insurance companies been raising prices by 100, 1,000% for so long without an alternative like this?
Well, we don't really have a free market in healthcare in this country right now. We allow these players to operate without transparency traditionally. The fact that 60% of the cost of insulin is waste is not a well-known fact, but it's the reality that we're dealing in. And everybody that stands between the drug manufacturer and the consumer is benefiting from that waste. And we could go into political giving and so many other reasons why it hasn't changed. And I think other disruptors that have gotten into the business or attempted to, big ones, Amazon as an example, JP Morgan's tried to do something, Berkshire Hathaway, they've failed, or in some cases just piled on, like the Amazon pharmacy.
Yeah, so this is kind of a David and Goliath thing. Now, not to call Mark Cuban David because his pocketbook may, counter that argument. But still, this is the little guy. This almost is like big tech going up against big pharma.
It really is. If you look at, and there's some real genius to what he's doing, real quickly, if you're a pharmacy and you take insurance, you're not allowed to determine what your own cash price is for a drug. So if someone wants to buy it for cash, that gets dictated to you by the insurance industry. So montelukast is a good example of this. It's a generic for allergies and asthma. The insurance price, if you go in with your insurance, they're going to fill your prescription for 90 days for $25. But if you say, well, can't I just buy it cash? They're not allowed to offer a fair cash price. They have to give you what the insurance company told them, which is $400 for that 90-day supply. Yet if you don't take insurance and you determine your own cash price, you could be profitable as a pharmacy selling that drug for $34.50 for a year supply. And that's what he's avoiding, is the controls that are in place in the system today where they don't allow you to determine your own fair cash price. He's not taking insurance. It's really seems simple, but it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, no insurance at all. So everything's out of pocket, which may be a turnoff when you first hear it, but then you see the reduced prices and that may change things around.
Exactly. The fair cash price for lots of these drugs will be less than the copay people have been paying.
We're with Paul Seegert. You're listening to First Light. He's with PCS Advisors. We're talking about this new online pharmacy that Mark Cuban has launched with a new company. How long will you think it'll take for this thing to catch on if it does? Is this going to be a long haul for Cuban?
I bet it will. And I hope it catches on and others enter the space and we start to see some real competition in this industry because we desperately need it.
What does it take, though, to launch something like this? Is this something that only a billionaire could do, with the capital behind it and all of that? Or is this a concept that could catch on?
I think it certainly helps that you have someone like Mark Cuban doing it because he is going up against one of the most powerful. This medical industrial complex that we have is enormously powerful.
Great, Paul. We appreciate the insight. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
This has been the First Light Podcast, featuring excerpts from our radio broadcast of Friday, January 28th, produced by TJ Cutini. You can hear our full show early every weekday morning on the air, streaming from our radio stations all across America. I'm Clayton Neville. Thanks for listening to the First Light Podcast.
What makes some people successful? How can they help you on your journey? Find out with Torrey.
Speaking with Mekhi Phifer.
I used to get really sad on Sundays. If the world is just a routine that is the same every week, I'm going to lose my mind. That depresses me. It's like I got to be a creative person because I need a circus. I need things to be different.
So it's not even about a destination. It's really all about the journey, and the journey never stops.
Torrey Show. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.